Well, hi there, Colin M, aka the Tone Wizard here, and I hope you're doing very well wherever it is that you may happen to be. I'm doing very well on one of the final days of my vacation down here in Australia, so cheers. Got a couple of days left, and I had a quiet moment here, so I thought I would churn out an episode of Ween Talk. I'd like to thank the new subscribers to the channel. Thank you very much for joining me here, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts on this video and future videos, and maybe even previous videos in the comments. So thank you very much for getting involved. Now, let's jump right into this. I'm going to be ranking Ween's, what I consider to be Ween's 10 studio releases from, in my opinion, the best to the best, let's just call it, because they're all good albums. I thought I would do this because I've been doing album by album reviews, and it got me thinking of what my favorite albums are, and that's kind of changed since I reviewed the first two albums, The Pod and God, Ween, Satan, on the channel. You can check out those videos if you want to cruise through my channel. But let's get right into this here. And by the way, if you agree or disagree with any of my rankings, please let me know in the comments and give me your thoughts. And also, if you've ever been to Australia, let me know if you've tasted this fine beer here. This is a Cooper's Pale Ale, or maybe let me know if you've tasted any other fine beers down here. I've been into some really good stuff from Pirate Life Brewing and from the Prancing Pony Brewery, which is right around where I'm at here in Australia. Anyways, let's get into it. Number 10 in my album rankings would be The Pod, which was released in 1991, and I've done a review of it on my channel. For me, the standout tracks are Dr. Rock and The Stallion, parts 1 and 2, along with Pork Roll, Egg and Cheese. And if I'm going to be given a favorite solo performance from each of the albums, and I would take the discordant Scotchgard fueled guitar solos on Frank. I also did a cover of Frank on my channel, which you can check out if you have a look. So The Pod, to me, it's never really been my favorite. It's probably my least favorite. But when I went back and listened to it for my review, I did find that there were some good moments on there, like The Stallion, of course, Dr. Rock, and Pork Roll, Egg and Cheese. Moving on to number 9. Pardon me. I've got 12 Golden Country Greats, which was put out in 1996. If you don't know the story about that album, my understanding is that Ween had heard somewhere that if you go to Nashville, anybody who has the money can hire the studio musicians there at their disposal. And these are guys who played on records, huge records in the 70s, from everybody from Elvis to Roy Orbison and stuff like that. So they decided to just do exactly that. They packed up, went to Nashville, and had all those famous studio guys play on a record which would eventually become Ween's 12 Golden Country Greats. Now, it's not my personal favorite. I like it a little bit more than The Pod. The standouts on there are Piss Up a Rope, which is one of my all-time favorites and one of my cover band's favorite tracks to play, and always rips people up to sing along to it. It's a great track. And it's a staple of their live show. Richard Smoker's on there, and you've got all the different solos that happen on there, which we'll get into in a second. One of my personal favorites on that album is I Don't Want to Leave You on the Farm. So my favorite solo from that album is, of course, from Mr. Richard Smoker. You've got a guitar solo, a piano solo, a slide guitar solo, a fiddle solo, and you've got a lovely horn section at the end, which I think, is that a French horn or some kind of ragtime trumpet? I'm not too sure. If you know, let me in the comments. Another note about that song is that I've always sang it, "You eat clown meat." I don't know why, when I first heard the song, I thought at one point he said clown meat. I could have been pretty drunk. I'm not too sure. Number 8 on my Ween albums, studio albums ranked, is the 1992 release Pure Guava. The standout tracks on there for me are The Stallion Part 3, Don't Get Too Close to My Fantasy, which is one of my all-time favorites, Big Jim, which grew on me over the years, Push the Little Daisies, which has never been a favorite Ween song of mine, but of course it's their most commercially successful album. I think it charted quite high, actually, in Australia, which is another reason why I decided to do this. I was thinking about that track. Also on there is Pumpin' for the Man, which is a great track, and that would be the notable solo on this album that I would point out, the Pumpin' for the Man solo. And I've always wondered, I'm pretty sure that track is sped up. There's some slightly uncourteous language on there as well, but definitely those tracks are worth listening to, but that's probably not my favorite album of theirs. That would be number 8. So number 7, I've got 2007's La Cucaracha, and this is where things started to get interesting to me, because as I started plowing through these track listings, some of these albums had a lot of great tracks, and it was kind of hard for me to rank. I really had to lean on my personal favorites, so a lot of you may disagree with me with some of these rankings, but I would encourage you just to take another sip and let me know in the comments what you think about that. But anyways, the standouts on La Cucaracha are My Own Bare Hands, which is an amazing track. This is also the point, I think this is one of Diener's finest tracks and one of his finest performances, and I always think that the lyrics in there are pretty fucking hilarious. They're nonsensical, accusatory. I'm gonna take your lawnmower and cut my fucking grass or something. Take a shit on the pitch and fuck Hooba Juba. There's some great lyrics in there, albeit open to interpretation. I think I heard. I think this was the track that I heard that was kind of a track by Dean Ween that was kind of lashing out about his wife. The story that I heard is that he had just paid for her to go through school, college or something along those lines, and then she just ended up kind of being a stay-at-home mom thing. I don't know if any of that's true, but that is something that I had read somewhere. So the standout tracks on there are My Own Bare Hands, Your Party, which is an all-time favorite, one of my cover band's favorite tracks to play as well. Learning to Love, always a favorite. If I could remember all the words to that song, I think I would cover that. But Object, which probably has my second favorite solo from this album on there, and Sweetheart in the Summer. And so for standout solo from, in my opinion, the 7th best Ween studio album, I've got the solo from Object, which is just such a sad, squeezed little guitar thing. I had to put it on there, but I think Sweetheart in the Summer, the very Dire Straits, Mark Knopfler sounding guitar work, to me is some of Diener's finest. It's a remarkably clean and beautiful song in their catalog. It kind of stands out. I don't think there's anything else that's quite like it. So that, to me, is their 7th best studio album. Now, number 6 is God, Ween, and Satan. And I have to tell you, if I would have made this video about 2 months ago before I did my my full review of that album, I don't think this would be very high on the list at all. I think it may have been in number 9 after the pod. But having put some time in that album, I have to say it's slowly becoming one of my more favorites. Standout tracks, and there's a ton on there. And this is quintessential listening for Ween, because you kind of get to see the genesis of a lot of the madness that they would later create. I think in some ways the production of the pod, definitely the pod, and even Pure Guava, the production wasn't quite as good, in my opinion, as what they captured on the 1990 album God, Ween, Satan. But standout tracks for me would be You Fucked Up, Don't Laugh, I Love You, Common Bitch, and Let Me Lick Your Pussy. And I think the solos, the many intricate guitar parts on LMLYP are worth a second listen, or the 1,000th listen, if you're tuning in here, depending where you're at with your journey with that album. That would be the number 6 ranked album for me by Ween. Moving on to number 5, right smack dab in the middle, I think this is a perfect place for it, would be 2000's The White Pepper. This is probably the most positive and cheery sounding album that Ween ever did, in my opinion. You've got tracks like Bananas and Blow, The Crow, Pandy Fackler, Flutes of Chi, and Back to Basin. For me, the standout solo on this album has to be I think it's a Fender Rhodes, or at least a Fender Rhodes sounding kind of organ tone that Glenn, I presume it's Glenn who played on the album. I think it is. On the Wikipedia page it shows personnel, and it just shows engineers and mixers, but let me know. I'm pretty sure by this point those guys were all playing on the albums, even though I know Mickey has done a lot of work, but I don't think he can tickle the keys quite like what we heard in that track. Which is Pandy Fackler. I'm talking about the Rhodes solo from Pandy Fackler, which is another standout from that. I've been into the beers today. I'm getting a little incoherent, but look at me, man. I'm surrounded by birds and grass and different insects trying to crawl up my shorts. I first sat down to do this video. I sat in a rickety old chair. The thing blew out. I landed on my tailbone. Luckily, the beer wasn't open. I didn't have any camera gear out, because that would have been a fucking calamity. But I'm having a good time here, and this vacation can't last long enough. But alas, we're nearing the end of it, and just as we pass the halfway mark of our list, and this is where things might get a little controversial for you if you are a hardcore Ween fan, because I'm going to put Shinola on this list. To me, it's a studio album. They might be demos and outtakes, but that's one of the most complete coherent albums that they did. All those tracks kind of have a theme. It's a rundown, washed out, kind of decrepit sounding album with momentary points of kind of happiness and uplifting stuff. Standout tracks on there would be Did You See Me, which is probably, got some birds folks, which is probably the most Pink Floyd sounding thing they've ever done, except for the little cover snippet of that one Pink Floyd song in Captain Fantasy, I think it is. I can't remember. Let me know in the comments. But standouts would be Did You See Me, Someday, I Fell in Love Today, which is a kind of, to me, always sounded like the Beatles, something they did off of either Magical Mystery Tour, or it really sounds like Come Together. I can't quite decide. But you've also got Gabrielle on there, the studio version of Gabrielle, or as close to it as I think we're ever going to get. Like in terms of well-produced, well-mixed sounding version of Gabrielle, which is a live staple, and it's definitely got that Thin Lizzy vibe to it. I like the solo on that, especially when they play it live. Pardon me. I'm getting a little bit of this fucking hay fever in me. I flew from Canada, -5 with 6 inches of snow on the ground, right into summer, and the pollen hit me like a fucking... like a Mack truck, or a Matt Ute, as they would say out here. So now we're going to get into the top 3, and I'm going to take 3 sips. Because I really want to express myself with accuracy and dexterity here. The third on my ranking of Ween's 10 studio albums is Chocolate and Cheese. This one I thought would be lower, but when I looked at the song list, you've got Voodoo Lady, Freedom of 76, Buenos Tardes Amigo, and what Diener was talking about, along with Roses Are Free and Don't Shit Where You Eat. This sandwich has some fucking meat on it, people. This pork roll, egg, and cheese is mostly pork and cheese, if you're asking me, because those are big tracks. Those are huge staples of their live stuff, especially a lot of what they did around this era and right through to this day. And those are also some of the Ween tracks that I loved early on as I started listening to Ween. The best solo on the album would be the Roses Are Free solo, the doubled guitar. It's such a simple thing, but especially when they play it live, they take it to another level. But I've just always loved that track, and it's one of their more heavily Prince-inspired pieces of music that they have. So yeah, always a favorite of mine. And again, an album that I thought might be lower, but as I looked at that track listing, I had to put it in the top 3. Now, please, once again, as you're listening along, let me know what your thoughts are, and maybe just put your whole rankings as we go along here. I'd love to see what you guys think, and if you disagree with me or have any differences of opinion, that's always interesting, and that's why I do the channel. So, number 2 on Ween's studio albums ranked. Their 10, what I consider their studio albums ranked, would be The Mollusk, 1997's The Mollusk. Standout tracks are, of course, The Mollusk, Ocean Man, which has a sizzling fucking solo on it, Buckingham Green, which is a guitar anthem. I was watching the South Park 25th anniversary show with Primus in South Park, and they had guests like Rush on there, and Ween were performing Buckingham Green, and you could see Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson from Rush were watching Diener as he just burned through the Buckingham Green guitar solo, and there's a moment where they kind of look. I actually did an episode on my channel about that whole show, and I talked about that moment in there. So check that out on the channel if you feel like it. But 1997's The Mollusk. You've got The Mollusk, Ocean Man, Buckingham Green, Blarney Stone, Waving My Dick in the Air, or in the Wind, and Mutilated Lips. And if you're looking for a good version of Mutilated Lips live, check out the performance they did on Conan O'Brien. I'll try and link it in the description if I can remember, but it's fantastic. I won't get into it too much, but go check it out. It's awesome. So that was the number 2 on my top 10 rankings, and of course, you know there's only one album left, and it's not going to be the Sky Cruiser EP, Craters of the Sack, or the Friends EP. It's going to be Quebec, which was released in 2003. It's actually probably in my top 5 albums, period, of all time. I go back to it time and time again, and as a track to track to track to track piece of music, there's not really much that I will skip in there, certainly in the first half of the album. And I mean, I could say what the highlights are, but you've got It's Gonna Be a Long Night, Zoloft, Transdermal Celebration, one of their best tracks, one of their best known tracks. Of course, famously, the guitar solo to Transdermal Celebration was played on the borrowed guitar of Santana during a Ween tour. You've got Tried and True, which is one of my favorite tracks. Happy Colored Marbles, which is a track that really grew on me, especially when I saw them play it live at the reunion in, I believe it was 20, was it 20, time has gone by, 16, help me out. I can't even remember what date the fucking reunion was, and I was there for 3 fucking days. But my probably favorite Ween track of all time is the Argus. That's of course on there. Chocolate Town, another one of my favorites. This is a prog album in many people's eyes, and my favorite track, the Argus, is probably one of the best prog tracks I've ever heard in my life. I'm not a big prog guy, but it kind of makes a lot of prog stuff look like shit. It's so beautiful. It's complex, yet it's arranged perfectly. The instrumentation, the performances, the vocal deliveries are fantastic. The little choices that they make, like adding the bells in at the beginning, that real kind of Zappa breakdown that they do with all the instrumentation. It's one of my favorite songs ever. The first time I heard that song, I knew it was going to be a favorite of mine. I had to listen to it again and again and again, and then I had to learn it, and that was kind of one of the reasons why I started a Ween tribute band, was just to get a band together that could play that fucking song live. Always a favorite of mine. Anyways, those are my top, those are my rankings for Ween's 10 studio albums. Please let me know again what you think. If you've enjoyed this video, or you're a regular subscriber, please like the video. If you're new, please subscribe to my channel, and let me know maybe in the comments below if you think Ween's going to get around to making another studio album. I have a lot of thoughts on that. One being that they're still working out a working arrangement between all parties that will allow them to engage in that process and make another album in a positive setting. I think they've got the songs in them. I think that there's time for that, and I would love to see that album. There is, however, a lot of expectation. It's kind of like the, Jesus Christ, I'm getting swarmed by flies here. It's kind of like the Game of Thrones author, George R. Martin, who's now it's been so long between books that you wonder if it's ever going to happen. But let me know. Anyways, thank you very much for watching this video. I'm going to enjoy the rest of this beer and maybe get attacked by birds. But take very good care of yourselves, and I look forward to talking to you in a future video. Bye-bye.